January 23, 2022, an AFC Divisional matchup between the Bills and Chiefs, with the Chiefs down 29-26. 1:13 left in the game, ball on their own 36. The Chiefs needed to make something happen fast. Mahomes delivered a strike over the middle to Tyreek Hill at around the 50-yard line. Hill broke away from the defender covering him and then sped past a half dozen Bills, putting the Chiefs ahead with his 64-yard touchdown. But the Bills marched back down the field with a touchdown of their own, putting them back up by 3. With only 13 seconds left, the Bills had a 94.35% chance of winning at this point. So how did Tyreek Hill help the Chiefs pull this off? People often wonder why Tyreek Hill is one of the best receivers in the league. Is it just that he's fast? To understand his rise to greatness, we need to look at his early years. He was born in Coffee County, Georgia, to 2 teenage parents, but he was raised by his grandparents in hopes of providing him more stability. However, this was not the case. His grandfather, Herman Hill, was a suspect in 15 criminal cases from 1989 to 2016. They ranged from theft to burglary, which Tyreek was exposed to early. Herman was convicted on several charges, and Hill's grandmother, Virginia, had a few charges against her as well, for things like trespassing and disorderly conduct. Still, his grandfather was his football coach when Tyreek was young, and he continued to gravitate towards sports. In high school, he joined the football team. Many would assume that this was where Tyreek found his talent. But no, the sport he was really focused on was track. Tyreek had blistering speed, and his accomplishments in track caught national attention. In the 2012 Georgia High School State Championships, Tyreek crushed the competition in both the 100-meter and 200-meter races. He then ran in the Golden South Classic, defeating his competition again. But more importantly, he ran the 200-meter dash in 20.14 seconds, which is just 1/100th of a second off from breaking the all-time high school record. You might be thinking, these sound like Olympic track times. And you'd be right. Hill joined the U.S. Junior Olympics team, where he competed in the 200-meter dash and won the bronze medal. He also took home gold as part of the 4x100 relay team. How many football players do you know that have won a gold medal in the Olympics? But at this point, Hill was barely even a football player. It wasn't his priority, and he didn't stand out in high school, even though he wanted to play college football. Hill was electric on the field with the ball in his hands due to his speed and quickness, but the ball had to be in his hands. He wasn't great at any one position and wasn't even good at running routes. Tyreek had Olympic speed. But how many times has such a raw talent been able to quickly develop their game and suddenly become a key player on the team? How many receivers have we seen in the NFL and college that had the speed but couldn't turn themselves into a true playmaker? Additionally, Tyreek's grades were not at the level D1 schools wanted. Because of all these issues, Hill didn't get any offers from big-name schools. He was basically just a track star who also played football with subpar grades. So he picked a junior college, Garden City Community College in Kansas. But Tyreek did focus more on football this time around, and his coaches saw the potential in getting him the ball. He took handoffs, he played receiver, he lined up for direct snaps, and one of the things he really excelled at was returning kicks. If it sounds like he was all over the field, that's because he was. In his sophomore year, he had 1,200 total yards and 11 touchdowns. Tyreek Hill was now becoming a football Swiss Army knife with Olympic-level track speed. It was finally time for the bigger schools to take notice. His playmaking potential was clear. He began to get recruited by schools like Alabama and FSU. But ultimately, he decided to join Oklahoma State. Now in his junior year at a D1 school, his numbers kept improving. He was scoring touchdowns in many different ways and had over 1,800 yards. Hill was finally showcasing his potential at the D1 level. But then, he almost ruined everything for himself. He had an incident with his girlfriend at the time, things got physical, and Hill was now facing legal action. Because of this, he was kicked off the team. And no other teams wanted anything to do with him. Yet again, Hill was on pace to become a solid NFL prospect before he appeared to throw it all away. Hill took a plea deal for his case, and the judge ruled that he needed to either be working or in school. For nearly a year, Hill wasn't on a football team, but he was lucky because one team was actually willing to give him one last chance: West Alabama. So now, Hill was at his third school. He had an excellent year there, but his overall college career had been extremely rocky. When he declared for the draft, he was seen as a risk for a lot of teams. He had such upside, some people thought he could go in the second round. But due to his brief amount of D1 experience and his troubling personal life, many believed no one would draft him at all. He was still considered a project and primarily an Olympic-level track star turned gadget player. Because of all these factors, Tyreek was passed over and over until the 5th round of the 2016 NFL Draft. The Chiefs decided he wasn't such a gamble that low in the draft. They were getting Olympic speed at a good value, which they could build into a decent gadget player. At best, the Chiefs were hoping to turn Hill into a serviceable wide receiver. Just because Tyreek Hill ran a 4.29 40, it didn't necessarily mean he'd become a good wide receiver. Like Herm Edwards said, there's a lot of guys that run fast, like he has 4.2 speed, but some guys only have 5.2 hands. It's true. How many other prospects have ran an amazing 40 just to become decent to good receivers? John Ross ran a 4.22 40. He played 5 years in the NFL. His best season saw him only get 28 receptions for 506 yards. Marquise Goodwin ran a 4.27 and made a decent career for himself. He played for 5 different teams, never cracking 1,000 receiving yards in a single season, with most years being below 500. Even look at DK Metcalf, who not only ran a 4.33, but by all accounts should be destroying players with his 6'4", 235-pound frame. Metcalf is of course a solid player, consistently around 1,000 receiving yards each season, usually between 60 and 90 receptions, but how is it that he isn't taking over games? Tyreek is half a foot shorter than him, 45 pounds lighter, and he's had 3 years in a row of over 100 receptions. 2 of those years even over 1,700 yards. What is Tyreek doing that others aren't? Well, it didn't start out that great. Tyreek was mainly that gadget player his first year in the NFL. He had 61 receptions for 593 yards and 6 touchdowns. But the Chiefs utilized him as much as they could. They used him in the return game, including a breathtaking play where he returned a kick against Denver 85 yards for a touchdown, and not only weaved past many defenders, but hit a top speed of 22.8 miles per hour. They used the rookie in the run game where he had 24 rushing attempts for 267 yards and 3 rushing touchdowns. However, those were the highest rushing numbers of Tyreek's career, because it was time for him to quit relying so much on being fast and start working on his game as an all-around receiver. If there was anything Tyreek learned in college, it was not to squander a golden opportunity. And there lies the difference between Tyreek and other fast receivers. He'd always have the speed, the quickness to juke people out, but he needed to perfect his all-around game. In college, the teams were looking for ways to get the ball in his hands, but now Tyreek was looking for ways to do that himself, perfecting running routes, focusing on the details of every route in the route tree, learning how to create separation based on defensive looks, and making sure those 5'2" hands turned into some 4'2" hands. And the results showed immediately. His second year in the NFL, he had 1,183 yards and 7 touchdowns. Tyreek did get some criticism on his catching ability, like when receiving legend Steve Smith said he wasn't a pure hands catcher. But Hill continued working on his game, including his catching and grip strength. He kept improving, going to the Pro Bowl every year, making first-team All-Pro 5 out of his 8 seasons, constantly putting up humongous numbers and getting timely big catches in games, especially in big playoff games. Which brings us back to where we began. After the 2021 season, the 2-seeded Chiefs met the 3-seeded Bills in the divisional round of the playoffs. With 1:13 left in the game and the Chiefs trailing by 3, they threw it to the fast man, who at this point was their premier wide receiver. Tyreek ran an outstanding route to break free from the defender plastering him, careful to find a soft spot in the zone, and then he took it to the house. Even though his effort put the Chiefs up by 4, the Bills came right back to steal the lead once more. And now, there were only 13 seconds left in regulation. Kansas City was on their own 25 with all their timeouts, meaning they would likely only have time for 2 quick plays to push themselves down the field and into field goal range to hopefully tie the game. But in order to get a 52-yard field goal, they'd have to move at least 40 yards quickly. Each pass had to come out immediately, so receivers would have to move down the field in a flash, and that's exactly what the Chiefs did. They were less concerned with their 94.35 chance of losing and more focused on their speed. They threw it Tyreek's way and he raced up the field, gaining 19 yards and only wasting 5 seconds of game clock. That play was instrumental in not only setting them up with better field position, but on the next play, Tyreek's speed was such a concern for the Bills' defense, it allowed Kelce to find a soft spot in the coverage and gain more than the 21 yards they were looking for. The Chiefs tied the game up with a field goal, took it to overtime, and won it there. It's that famous 13-second drive that will live on forever. And though Kelce had the second catch to set up the field goal, Hill's first catch on that drive and previous big touchdown was what gave them any kind of shot. That's why Tyreek Hill is so good. When he is on the field, you know that he is capable of getting the most yards in the shortest amount of time for any player. You cannot say the same about other receivers with that speed, because they don't have the ability to find the soft spot in zones, easily beat coverages, or even the sure hands needed to be a top-tier playmaker. Hill has maximized his potential by working on his weaknesses. At this point, he might even be a good receiver without that insane acceleration. Dolphin Nation knows how badly the team needed him last year and hopes the game plan is still majorly focused on getting Tyreek Hill the ball. This is The Gridiron.